open a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this day today. Pray that you'll bless our time together. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today I'm going to title this, I'm going to give credit to Glenn Beck. I know Glenn Beck's religious beliefs, so don't. But I'll play a clip of his today because I'm going to talk about Middle East, little U.S. politics, then Middle East, then artificial intelligence. And one of the things we need to keep in mind when we talk about artificial intelligence is similar to when we talk about British intelligence or central intelligence. They're called central intelligence, artificial intelligence, British intelligence, not central wisdom, artificial, real wisdom, or that type of thing. So they're based on somebody being very smart, but we know from personal experience a lot of times that very smart people cannot be very wise. But in a video updating some pretty significant things in the artificial intelligence space, Glenn used this phrase, the intersection of peril and promise. So I just changed it a little bit to at the prophetic intersection of peril and promise, because I think we're really at a very significant time. So just a few, people call this the commercial part. I don't make any money off of these, so I just want you to know that. So I did a few updates this week. I did Minute to Midnight with my friend Tony from New Zealand. On Monday, I did Tom Hughes, Hope for Our Times on Tuesday. I did something with Olivier Melnick Wednesday or Thursday, and then I think that was Wednesday. Then Friday, I did Stand Up for the Truth with Mary Danielson on Q90 FM up in Green Bay. So you can find all those links online if you want to search for them. And we will be doing a prophecy roundtable on technology, technocracy, transhumanism on August 13th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern with most of the usual guys, or maybe more than most of the usual guys. And believe me, this is one of these ones where we could go for many hours, just because of the things that have happened in the last week. So I want to explain a little bit too. People ask questions about what do these things mean that are on your slides? So maybe I'm a little too clever by half because I know what they mean. And I don't usually explain them, but let me go to this slide. Maybe this will help. So, for example, this is my little canary in the coal mine, or canary guy. Remember canary in the coal mine. And then these are different chess pieces, because when a lot of people talk about geopolitics today, they use the concept of the grand chessboard or a giant chessboard. And I would do that. I just don't have time to Photoshop all that stuff and get it ready to go with reading all the other stuff. So I have made up like different chess pieces that represent different players, I think, that are in the Middle East and elsewhere in the end times. For example, this is, of course, Israel. Let me get my little pointer here. Now I can't do it there. So this one's Israel on the left, then the United States, then Saudi Arabia. And you see what I do with Saudi Arabia, I take the flag, wrap it around the chess piece, and then I put the Royal Clock Tower in Mecca on the top of the chess piece. So everything has a meaning in there. There's nothing that's just there for show. You have to interpret it. So, and by the way, there are some people, remember when we read that passage about the Antichrist will change times and seasons. Well, you could make the case, I'm not saying that this is a conclusion that I have reached. I think that who the Antichrist and from where he emerges is still somewhat of an open question. And of course, that I've now offended all of my friends who are certain that they know who it is and where he comes from. We know it's a he, but so in that Mecca clock tower, one of the things it's designed to do, and I think it's the third tallest building on planet Earth at Mecca. And it's the largest clock in the world. It far exceeds the size of Big Ben in London, but it has established a Mecca mean time, like Greenwich Mean Time. So is that what it means when it says it changes times and seasons? I don't know. I'm just saying is just something to think about. So that's why I put it in there. Then my next piece, this is probably the one, this is the one I had Erdogan cradling in his arms last week. That's one of the waterfront buildings at Doha. By the way, where I got this idea was there's this place out there that has skyscraper chess, world skyscraper chess. So they make chess pieces out of these different skyscrapers. So that's a building in Doha, Qatar. And I just put the Qatari flag there, the red and white, and then the Qatari symbol. And then since Qatar gets all of its revenue from gas mainly, that's a gas platform on top of the tower. Okay, so there's maybe I should just do an update, hidden meanings in the updates. And then the next one, that's a chess king like Turkey, like an obelisk. Not Turkey, Egypt. Then the next one is Turkey with the flag. That's the presidential symbol there. This one is the new Syria government. That's the 3 stars in the flag. This is the old one that kind of cracked, and it shows the soldiers getting ready to run away. That's the old Syria. And then they're sort of sitting around the Iranian, because they were all proxies of Iran. You have the Houthis, the red one here at the bottom, the yellow one Hezbollah, the green one Hamas, and then of course you have Russia and Ukraine up there. Again, these are the flags or a symbol of Russia, the onion domes, and Putin's very much in the Russian Orthodox Church. And I'm not sure what that one on the right is. That's a mystery even to me. I think I was trying to do something different with the Houthis, but I don't think so. There's somebody else in the Middle East that is important there. So anyway, so those are some of the symbols we use, and I've got my wheel of prophecy and everything. So we do talk about this. So there's a lot of questions in Bible prophecy, and some way now. No, maybe this is the way to stop getting all these emails. I'm going to start sharing all the emails. I'll link all the emails that I get in a week about everybody's different theories on how these things are going to unfold. And as soon as I say that, then people say, well, if he's going to do that, I don't want my thing to go public. So maybe that's the way to stop getting a lot of emails. And I don't mind that you send them to me. And I review some of them. I just don't have time to comment on all of them. But we do live at a time. Look, this is a prophecy, and I think this is a prophecy related to the end. I talk about it every week, that Daniel wanted to know, after he'd written all these great prophetic passages, he wanted to know, well, when will these things be? And he was told, go away, Daniel, it's not for you to know. Seal up the book till the time of the end. And now then the question becomes, when is the time of the end? Some people will say the time of the end was the transition from Old Testament to New Testament. I think the time of the end actually means something like time of the end. So what we know though is that there is a prophecy, and it talks about them in Daniel chapter 11, that there will be these people referred to in a number of different teachings that I've seen, the masculine, those who understand will be wise and will instruct many. And so we really want to be in that category of people. So that's the irrelevant stuff. So just like me make a couple comments about U.S. politics. This is from Politico the other day. Epstein crisis forces Republicans to shut down the House early. Then you have The Hill. And this is sort of consuming the news cycle. And it's interesting to watch. One, I don't know what's going to happen, okay? I've heard that there are 100,000 pages of documents that the Attorney General and the FBI have to review. And of course, what do you see now? You see all the people on the left side of the political spectrum, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of these newspapers are running around like, why isn't Trump releasing the Epstein files? And it's sort of like, where were you people for 4 years of the Biden administration, and you never said a peep about them? Now, I don't know what's there, okay? And I was looking at some of the statistics on people who were making claims of abuse. It's believed that most of it stopped around, at least from Epstein's side, 2004, 2005, because that's when he started to get in trouble with the law and he had to mind his business as to what he's doing, even though he got a sweetheart deal. But that would mean, so even if you take underage girls that might be 14 or 15 and you add 20 to 30 years to their age, they're going to be in their 30s and 40s. I'm pretty sure that a lot of them that were able to establish their claims got monetary settlements. As part of their monetary settlements, they would have non-disclosure agreements. That's why they're not out there talking. And maybe they don't want to talk about it. So then the question becomes, even if you have them, are you going to be able to get around any potential statute of limitations that might exist? I'm not sure that, I just don't know. And then are they going to be willing to testify? Because you can subpoena them, but that doesn't mean they have to say anything if they don't want to. And having some personal experience with victims of sex abuse, a lot of times they don't want to talk about it. So there's a lot of obstacles to prosecuting anyone. Understand that the Trump administration, whether they've handled it correctly or not, they've only been in office for about 6 months now, as of this week. And it takes time to put these cases together. I've mentioned this many times. I'm a trial lawyer. I've been involved in white-collar criminal cases. And even though the FBI had the documents like the day a company collapsed financially, it was 3.5 years till the indictments were filed. And they had 50 FBI agents, 50 FBI agents, attorneys, accountants, tax experts, and everything working on these files for 3.5 years. And that's in one case. So that's why I always objected to these theories that they're going to be 200,000 and there were 200,000 sealed indictments. It's just absolute nonsense. There aren't enough attorneys to do that. It takes a long time, a lot of documents, grand jury testimony. So I'm just saying is lower your expectations on this. We'll see where it goes. But it's clear right now it's become a political thing to go against Trump. And because the people that are bringing it up now didn't say a peep during the entire time of the Obama administration for 8 years and the third Obama administration called I call the Biden administration for 4 years. So that 12 out of the last 16 years, nobody did really that much about it. So just, I guess just be patient, and we'll see what happens. I want to talk a little bit. This is a headline from the Times of London. One of the things we're seeing is this tremendous rise of anti-Semitism in the world. And a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not anti-Semitic, and then they go and do anti-Semitic things. So, for example, with regard to the Epstein files, I think it is still an open question whether Epstein, this is always funny to watch, because if you say Epstein was a Mossad agent or a Central Intelligence, a CIA agent, and you put all that stuff in your title, you're going to get a lot of clicks. And I take a little bit more balanced approach to it, because I'll say, well, I don't know for sure. And I'm like, well, nobody's going to watch that, right? If you put, I don't know what's really going on. But I don't know the specific details. But my concern is, and I think I talked a little bit with Olivier about this week. I don't know if it made it into the program that we did together. But if your default thing is to blame the Jews when you don't have hard evidence to do that, that's anti-Semitism. That's very clear. So when somebody just comes out and says, well, he had to be a Mossad agent, and then I see these videos of Netanyahu came to the White House and then Trump didn't want the Epstein files to be disclosed. Because, of course, it was the Jews control everything. That's the anti-Semitic part of that. And I'm just saying is, I don't think you have evidence for that. If you do have evidence, put it up. But if not, then don't defend yourself as saying, I'm not an anti-Semite, when you're actually doing anti-Semitic things. These tropes that the Jews control everything, this is a very dangerous thing. And there may be some involved. I don't know. We don't know yet. Let's see where the evidence leads. I want to talk a little bit. So the thing in Ukraine with Russia continues. This has been, by most estimates, between Ukraine and Russia, there are about 1.4 million casualties. That's dead and injured. That's a lot of people. And with regard to Ukraine and with regard to Russia, in an era of declining populations, this is a very, the loss of people is a very big deal. There were, for example, this was an article, this is in the Times of London. I saw another article, I think it was a big article in the New York Times the other day, about people who were convinced that Russia was in the right, that Russia was against the woke agenda, LGBTQ and that type of thing. So they left, in this case, this guy was from Texas, fled to Russia with his family to escape LGBT indoctrination in the United States. He came to Russia. What did they do? They sent him to the front lines in Ukraine. So I don't know. I don't remember the article enough because I read about 6,000 articles this week. I don't remember what happened to him. The other guy was, I think he was Russian, and he decided to go volunteer for the military. He had a wife, several young children. I think he was 26 or 28 years old. And what did they do? They gave him a very brief amount of training and then sent him to the front lines in Ukraine. They're cannon fodder. So don't tell me that Putin is this great caring leader or anything like that. It's nonsense. And it's a war. Both sides are in the war. We all know a lot of people who were in World War II. They were, in many respects, cannon fodder. My dad was a theology student in Tennessee, and he ended up in Europe in World War II in the infantry. This is the way wars are fought and have been fought for a long time. But this guy from Russia who went there, he ended up in Ukraine. He was injured a couple times, bad shrapnel wounds from a drone that exploded. He came back. They immediately sent him back to the front lines. Gets injured, comes back to the front lines, and then he went to a place where it was a Russian factory in the area of the front lines, and he said the people, the Russians that were working in there, they were emaciated, they didn't have food, it was terrible conditions, and then it was attacked by the Ukrainians, and everybody got injured, and he ended up in a POW camp in Ukraine. And he's in bad shape, and he's like, boy, the biggest mistake of my life, I volunteered, and look what happened to me. And I'm just saying there's thousands and thousands and thousands of stories like that in this Ukraine-Russia war. The other part, there's a guy that I've been following, but I know all the pro-Russian guys. I listen to what they say, but there's a guy that I think his name is Paul Warburg, W-A-R-B-U-R-G. He's got a YouTube channel. I would look him up, and he does a very good, balanced job. And the other thing that he's very good at, unlike me, is he's short and to the point. So he does like these 18 to 28 minute videos, and they're chock full of information. I think he lives in Utah, and he studies a lot. I think he's probably ex-military. And by the way, he's very pro-Ukrainian, so just factor that into the mix. But what we're seeing happen, and I think he made a good point in a video recently where he talked about this is changing the face of warfare. What's going on in Russia, Ukraine, and it's interesting that this is happening at this time in the world. Just wait till I get to the AI stuff later in my talk today. It's changing the face of warfare. What Ukraine is doing, Ukraine is outnumbered 3 or 4 to 1. They are manufacturing, I think I've read somewhere that they're going to manufacture something like 8 million drones this year. That's in the middle of a war in Ukraine, in a country that's being invaded. This is unbelievable. But the one thing that they're getting, and I'll mention this earlier too, everybody says, well, we Americans, we don't want to be involved in that because we don't get anything out of it. Well, we don't know that. But what Ukraine has developed in this back and forth with Russia is they've now have the world's largest store of battlefield data from these drones. They are collecting data, analyzing it through artificial intelligence tools. For example, they had drones that were programmed. Russia figured out how to jam the drones with radio signals. So what did Ukraine do? They started flying them by fiber optics, those thin fiber optic wires. And then Russia started figuring out how to interfere with that. So now what are they doing is, and this is where it gets kind of end time scary stuff, they're programming those drones with artificial intelligence. And they're totally autonomous. They do the target acquisition, target selection, and decisions to fire weapons autonomously through AI. And I will tell you, that is end time stuff. And so when we read prophecies in Ezekiel, it says they'll come up like a swarm, a cloud. Is that a cloud of drones? And when you talk about the drones, they're getting smaller and smaller. If battery technology increases, their range will increase. And it's changing the face of warfare. And so some defense experts, I don't know if I agree with this yet, say that things like aircraft carriers, fighter jets are becoming irrelevant. Because because if you make an autonomous AI-controlled fighter jet, if you can design it to withstand the G-forces, it can far exceed anything that a human-operated jet can do. Because a human-operated jet, at certain G-forces, the guys pass out. Even Tom Cruise in Top Gun, he would pass out. So this is very interesting. So I want you to listen to the stuff when I talk about AI at the end. And it's like, how does all of this stuff fit together? And how much of our assumptions that we make about how things operate and will operate and should operate are changing every day? And maybe changing in the next year. I think in his video, Glenn Beck says, hey, it's 2025. This is the last year of normal that we will ever have as humans. And I'm like, I don't know if I want this to be the normal baseline, what we see going on in the world. I've said this for the last 4 or 5 years. The first or second update that I do in the beginning of the year, I say, so in the beginning of 2020, I said, how far into the year will we go before we get to where we say, boy, could we just go back to the good old days of 2020 or 2021 or 2025 or 2024? And we have to agree that things are a bit chaotic in the world. I mean, my life is pretty normal, but I look around and things seem to be chaotic, geopolitically, in the computer technology, technocracy, transhumanist section. And just within the last 2 weeks, things have happened that are just blowing us away. Now, the Kremlin, they do have this is an article from the Times of London. Kremlin's fleet of spy ships threaten undersea network. The world is wired together with undersea cables. There is concern that if a war starts, people are going to start cutting the undersea cables. Now, there's a system that's been developed to get around that called Starlink. It's a project of Elon Musk. And there is go look to the Starlink website and you can see all the hundreds of satellites, maybe thousands of satellites that are up there. And they are on the verge of bringing broadband internet to every single person on the planet, regardless of where you are. PM and I were talking about this recently, when the family was over. I can remember when I didn't have a cell phone. And I remember I had a big case up in Mount Vernon, Ohio, 50 miles from downtown Columbus. And I would stop at the Interstate 71. There's a truck stop at Interstate 71 and 36, not too far from where we live now. And I would sit there sometimes for 2 hours, hanging out the window, talking on a payphone. Now, if you're young enough, you don't know what a payphone is, ask your parents what a payphone is. Ask them, like, did you guys used to pay for long distance phone calls? Do you remember that? Did you used to have to pay for every single phone call you made on your phone? You would get like 200 minutes, then they'd charge you. And I had $2,500, $3,000 a month cell phone bills because of all the travel that I did. And it's changed, and now we forget that everything becomes ubiquitous, and it used to be difficult. I remember I was in this big case with these lawyers from these big law firms, and I was the first one to figure out how to use my little Motorola flip phone. Remember those flip phone? Some people still have them. Like Pastor Mike, who used to be here, I used to joke with him, where did you get that, a museum? And, but I figured out how to use it as a modem to connect to the internet. And these guys, they all thought they were so sophisticated because they had Blackberries. Remember those Blackberries? So anyway, things change dramatically. They change quickly. And the change is exponential. And we're seeing it in AI and that type of thing. So, this could be a big deal in the next war. So now let's talk about Middle East and some of the things going on here. And it's a little bit hard to get this into a nice sequential thing. This is one political thing, though, I need to talk about. So we've got this lunatic running for mayor of New York, Mamdani, and he's a radical leftist, jihadi, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel person. And right now, it looks like he's going to win. That will mean that the largest city in the United States is being governed by a pro-jihadi guy. And by the way, he comes by it. He came by it legitimately. His parents were professors. His father was a professor at Columbia University, so it's not surprising that he would come up with these radical, idiotic ideas. But the problem is when it's like a cancer. You got to get it before it spreads. If it goes to New York, that's like a giant inoperable tumor almost in the way this is spreading around the world. It's happening in London, it's happening in the UK. It's a huge problem. Now this guy has come in, he is now the Democratic approved candidate for mayor of Minneapolis. He's a Somalian Muslim. a leftist Somali Muslim, and you'll hear a little quote from Trevor Loudon in a moment about the red-green axis. So this is a big problem. So the one other thing you need to be aware of is you live in the midst of a massive propaganda war that's going on. A war where half-truths are told like they're the absolute truth, particularly with regard to Israel and Gaza and other places in the Middle East. So, for example, we heard these stories about a church, Israeli Jewish settlers had set a church on fire in Samaria, also called the West Bank. You remember hearing those stories? Settler youth. So now what I've seen is people from Israel have gone up there, the Israel guys and other people, they've gone up to the church. The church is an ancient stone church. Stone doesn't burn. Okay, fires were set in the field, but what happens a lot of times up in that area, now look, there are people in Israel that do bad things, okay? But sometimes what happens is the Palestinian Arabs provoke them to do something, and then they do something, and lo and behold, the media is there. And the media never gets the lead part, what leads up to that particular incident. This happens all the time. And I think it happened here. And I think this is a little video.
But the New York Times just took it to a new low. They published a guest essay accusing Israel of genocide by Jewish...
Okay. This is a New York Times did a couple of... The New York Times went and they found a guy, I think he's from Brown University. What do we know about Brown University? Ivy League, left-wing, totally no wisdom. You know, they all think they're smart up there, but there's no wisdom involved in any of this. So they got the guy to write an editorial, I think it was last Sunday or maybe a little over a week ago in the New York Times, and it said, Israel's committing genocide in Gaza. So there's an organization called Honest Reporting that digs into these claims. So Honest Reporting dug into it, and they found they called up like 50 genocide experts, and all of them except this guy said it's not genocide what's going on in Gaza. It's part of a war. But so who gets published in the New York Times? Those other 50 guys? Now, the New York Times the other day did do a guest editorial where the guy said this is not genocide. So I'll give him credit for that. So here's this report from Honest Reporting about this claim of genocide.
But the New York Times just took it to a new low. They published a guest essay accusing Israel of genocide by Jewish-Israeli professor of Holocaust studies, Omer Baltov. Sounds credible, right? Until you realize he's been laying the groundwork for this accusation for years. And Baltov left the most important part out of his column. Under international law, genocide requires a clear proof of intent, a deliberate, explicit aim to destroy an entire population. Proving genocide isn't just hard, it's rare, and it demands indisputable evidence. Baltov's proof? A selection of cherry-picked and context-free quotes from Israeli leaders. Like Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech on October 7, 2023, the same day Hamas massacred 1,200 Israelis, where he said the enemy would pay dearly. But that enemy was clearly Hamas, not Palestinian civilians. Baltov even points to Israel's threat to turn Hamas strongholds to rubble and twists it, calling it evidence of special intent to kill Palestinians. But when Israel actively moved Palestinian civilians away from targeted areas, clearly proving Israel distinguishes between civilians and combatants, Baltov labels that as forced displacement, claiming it's further proof of genocide. So why did the New York Times choose Baltov when dozens of other experts clearly say what's happening in Gaza is not a genocide? Because when a fringe accusation against Israel comes from a Jewish expert, it gains dangerous credibility. It wasn't a bold moral stand by the Times. It was a calculated move to give anti-Israel propaganda legitimacy. And we're not falling for it. Tag the New York Times in the comments to let them know you're not falling for it.
Okay, so that for some reason the sequence of the syncing of that got a little bit out of line. But for example, the front page of this morning's New York Times is this. So what's the latest allegation? Starvation in Gaza. You hear it, right? This is on the front page of the New York Times, and people look at that picture and they think, oh my goodness, Israel is really starving these children. But now listen, do a little bit of thinking when you see this. A lot of times, these children are surrounded by adults who look like they haven't missed a meal. Okay? They're fine. And so so I was just communicating with somebody in Israel this morning, and they said, look, this is a big problem. They use these images, and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and all these crazy anti-Israel people pick up with us and say, look at what Israel's doing. They're starving these children. But the problem is, in Gaza, there is a lot of, I don't know how to say this. It sounds, I don't want it to sound racist, but there's a lot of intermarriage between cousins. There's a lot of birth defects. And so a lot of these children have very severe birth defects because of their genetic disorders. They're not being starved. And we can all feel sympathy for them, right? We get that. But the allegation is they're being starved to death. And that's not true. And then a lot of the aid, and I've been looking into this pretty extensively, the aid gets there and Hamas steals it and keeps it. And Hamas builds up these war chests. And it's concerning because Israel's been at this for getting close to 2 years now, and they still don't control all of Gaza. It's a very difficult war. There are 300 miles of tunnels. Were those tunnels built to transfer food around Gaza for a subway system? No, they were done to commit terror attacks and to control everything. And everybody looks at it and they say, look how much Israel has destroyed of Gaza. But the fact is that about every other home had some connection to the tunnel system. Do you know that? Have you seen that in the Washington Post, New York Times, other of these big newspapers? No, it never gets in there, but that's a fact. It's the same thing that happened up in Lebanon. If you saw some of my interviews with the people from Alma and then Miri Eisen, it was every other home in southern Lebanon was tied to Hezbollah in some fashion. So how do you get rid of that? You have to make it look like Gaza. That's probably the only way. And it's a terrible thing to have to do, but it's an impossible situation. And now Hamas is playing it for propaganda purposes. And you'll see some more of that in just a moment. So this is maybe some good news. Hamas is seeing that's why they go so much against the aid and food coming in, that their revenue is drying up. Why? They're not getting money from Iran. There's been an interruption in their money they're getting from Qatar. And the money that they get is pretty much money that they get from stealing aid. And I see these videos all the time. An aid truck goes in, and all of a sudden there are Hamas guys riding on the top of it. I mean, really? And then you say that it's Israel doing it? I saw a video this morning. Aid came in, people went up and got their flour, and then Hamas guys came and beat the people and took it away from them. So how do you deal with that particular situation? But everybody uses it as a propaganda tool. And this is a very big deal. So let's see here. So this is from the Daily Sabah. This is one of Erdogan's newspapers. Israel's invasion of the region is the main strategic problem. So we're just going to kind of go through these as they come up. Let me see if this one is the one that I want. Okay, this is Erdogan. He tweeted this the other day. Now, this is the English translation of his Turkish tweet. So, listen, you can go to X, you can follow Khamenei, you can follow Erdogan, self-torture yourself to follow these guys and find out what they're saying, because they are, if we live at this particular end time of history, these guys are or may be players or are setting up the next generation of guys to come on the scene and do things. So, like I say, watch Turkey. We can read the prophecies in Ezekiel 38 and 39, and we can see. Now, I personally think there's a controversy or a issue worthy of discussion about whether Russia's involved in this or not. There's no doubt that Turkey is. There's no doubt that Persia is. So I pay attention to Russia, probably as much as or more than the next guy, but I watch Turkey all the time. I watch Iran all the time. And Iran is really back on its heels. Talk about that in just a moment. So here's Erdogan, and he gives this speech this week at a defense contractor thing, and here's what he says. Netanyahu in his because this is like a conference. They bring all these people in to buy defense items, drones and other Turkish jet fighters and that type of thing. Turkey's really a leader in drones in the world. You can see them flying around Somalia and Libya with the different groups and people that are at war with each other there. So Turkey sells this stuff. So when he brings these contractors in, Erdogan's going to say, well, our Turkish military stuff is so great. Well, he does say that, but what else does he say? That's what's important. Netanyahu and his network of atrocities have long surpassed Hitler in barbarity. Even during the Holocaust in Europe, images as inhumane as those in Gaza did not emerge. What history books does this guy read? He is an abject liar. We've seen the pictures. Yes, Candace, we've seen the pictures and we believe them. No one with even a shred of human dignity can accept, remain silent about, or consent to that brutality where dozens of innocents die every day because they cannot find a morsel of bread or a sip of water. How's the media surviving? All the press people in Gaza, how are they getting by? While humanity dies in Gaza, while babies and children die, while people die trying to get a sack of flour, none of us can remain silent about this, and we will not. We cannot forget, and we will not forget, the severed heads of those innocent babies, the severed hands and legs of those children, the unburied corpses that dogs have begun to eat out of hunger, that starvation, that outcry, and the heart-wrenching screams of mothers. And a lot of these videos are made up. It's called Hollywood. And you'll see, like I saw a video of this little girl, she was talking about starving. And then she said she got her lines wrong and she started laughing. And they started it over again. And they take these dolls and they make them up to look like babies. Now listen, I'm not saying that there aren't children dying. That's not the point. The point is it's a massive propaganda war. In these dark days when mass deaths from starvation have begun, I call on the international community to unite on the side of humanity. Come, let us all stand together against this savagery. Come, let us say enough is enough to this oppression, this brutality. Come, let us not allow a handful of humanity's enemies, blinded by the lust for power, to further tarnish the name of humanity. Now, it would be interesting, did Erdogan send that to al-Shara in Syria after his troops started massacring Druze? Hundreds. I've heard as many as 3,000. Now, it's a little complex as to exactly what caused what, but we do know they were going in and hunting Druze, making them jump off buildings or get shot. I've seen the picture. It's ISIS coming back. And we're running around taking sanctions off al-Shara. Okay, so here's an article that I did not talk about earlier. Drones redo the rules of war in Ukraine. And then this week, what do we have? We have the head of the Houthis, and three times a week, everybody's running to shelters in Israel because these guys are launching missiles in. And the question is, they don't have anything in Yemen. They're poor. They have children starving, but they have enough to launch missiles. And the question is, how do you deal with it? Now, Jonathan Spire has a good article. I don't have time to go into it. In Jerusalem Post on Friday. There might be a link in the show notes. I don't know if I put one in or not. Go look up Jonathan Spire, Jerusalem Post, and he just went to Yemen recently because Yemen's in the middle of a civil war. So we talk about the Houthis. They control the northwest part of Yemen and the port and the capital, but there is an opposition group to them. So there's some discussion, if Iran can play the proxy game, maybe the people that want to defeat the Houthis and get them stop them from interfering with shipping in the Red Sea and elsewhere, get them to stop. So we can use proxies too, right? Everybody does that. So that's a big deal. So the forces, this is a summary of what he said. This is from an Iranian paper. The forces announced the precise military operation through spokesman Brigadier General Yahi Sari on Friday. Yemen's armed forces have slammed a hypersonic ballistic missile into the occupied city of Beersheba, billed as the Israeli regime's modern development and technology epicenter in support of the war-hit Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. So this is Iran news source. It's Iran propaganda, and you see how they make it up. Oh, this is just terrible. It's just like Ayatollah Khomeini hasn't been seen too much lately. People think he might not be too good, but Friday he gave a speech, and he talked about the glorious victory that Iran had in the recent 12-day war with Israel. So this is this guy. This is the guy that leads the Houthis. That's a sword, by the way, that he's holding. And by the way, the little phrase that's there, and it's on the chess piece that I made up for the Houthis. It says, "Death to Israel, death to America," and something about jihad. Down with Jews, down with America. Victory to Islam. Thank you. Always helps to have an Arabic speaker here. So this is an interesting article. So I'm going to go through this a little bit because I think it's pretty important. This is in the Wall Street Journal Thursday or Friday. And you need to understand that within our government, there's a war about, are we going to support Israel or not? There are a lot of people that don't want anything to do with Israel. So they're constantly leaking things to the press. And usually it's Washington Post or New York Times or Axios, but now this is a Wall Street Journal. Conservative pro-business Wall Street Journal has this article. I want you to listen to some of the things it says here. Washington struggles to rein in and embolden Israel. The Trump administration recently has expressed frustration with Israeli actions in Syria and Gaza. Trump's MAGA supporters in particular are becoming more critical of the president's support for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who they fear will drag the U.S. deeper into a morass of regional wars. And by the way, what did Tucker, what did Candace, what were people on Bannon's War Room saying? They're dragging us into war. Thousands of, if we bomb Iran, help Israel out by bombing Iran, thousands of Americans are going to be drug into Iran and die. How many? How many died? How many were injured? Same answer to both questions. 0. Amazing operation. And by the way, it's now coming out, Iran is saying they've been set back at least many years in their nuclear program from the strike. It was an amazing operation, and pretty much everything that President Trump said about this thing being obliterated turns out to be true. And defense experts have been looking at the videos and the satellite photos, and they say, we really did a job on these guys. So it'll take them a while to recover. So the White House said Trump was caught off guard by both incidents. They're talking about the Israel's attack on Syrian government and on Iran. The dissonance is partly a reflection of Israel's new position of power after several wars that have left it without any significant regional rivals, save former officials and analysts. Israel is now the strongest power in the Middle East, said Amos Hochstein, our friend, the pro-Iranian, pro-Lebanon. The guy said, Israel, you'll get everything solved if you just give up some rights to your oil in the Eastern Mediterranean. And how did that work out? And what was Amos Hochstein saying? Israel, there's like 10 areas along the Lebanon border that are in dispute. Just give them to Lebanon. Give them to Hezbollah. Everything will be okay. And by the way, this guy worked for a big liquefied natural gas company before he went back into the administration. And who's selling a lot of liquefied natural gas now? The United States and people like Amos Hochstein's former employer. It's probably just a coincidence. Ironically, that is not necessarily good news, he said, for Israel or the U.S., noting that Israel's strength is leading it to overreach, prolonging its wars. Now, do you think Israel, a country of 8 million people, wants to prolong its wars? Their people are tired. There's a lot of post-traumatic stress disorders in Israel, psychological problems and everything. I mean, imagine living where you got to run to the bomb shelter 2 or 3 times a week in the middle of the night. Or after your kids leave for school, here comes a missile and everybody's got to run to a bomb shelter. And you don't know whether your kids are going to make it or not, because you don't know where the thing's going to land. So it's a lot of problem. Israel's recent assertiveness has in part been encouraged by the Trump administration, which joined in the strikes on Iran and hasn't gotten an Israeli-Hamas truce in Gaza. The president's decision to join Israel's attack on Iran, the first time the two countries fought side by side in a war, that's kind of an interesting historical fact, has reinforced Israel's view that the U.S. is aligned with its Middle East goals. The Trump administration has greenlighted Israeli actions in Gaza and Lebanon and didn't stand in Israel's way when it attacked Iran last month. But then it flashes a red light on Syria after initially echoing Israel's concerns. And then it says, here's some of the money quotes in the article. When you have this kind of differentiated approach, it requires very clear communication to avoid mixed signals, said Shapiro. There have been some gaps there which can lead to the misunderstandings and then friction between the two governments after the fact. And this is the one that really bothers me. A senior administration official said the White House coordinates closely with Israel and has considerable influence over Netanyahu because the prime minister, Netanyahu, knows that the United States literally is the sole reason the state of Israel exists. I'm telling you, my Israeli Zionist friends will go ballistic when they read that. So anyway, the article goes on, and you can get it at the Wall Street Journal. I think there's a link in the show notes. If not, I'll try to put it in. Others say the reality of the relationship is far more complex. While the U.S. sells Israel advanced weapons and actively defends it against attacks, no American president would fully cut off that support to send Israel a message. Netanyahu knows this and operates knowing he can't really lose U.S. backing. And I'm just telling you, this is like bumping up right against the anti-Semitism line, in my opinion. It's a Wall Street Journal. So you need to learn that the editorial page and the news part of the Wall Street Journal are kind of separately operated. So you'll get sort of New York Times type propaganda in the other one. So this is a problem. This is a big article in the Wall Street Journal the same day. Israel's 12-day war reveals a gap in U.S. missile stockpile. These things are expensive. These anti-missile missiles cost a lot. They cost millions of dollars. And Israel's been going through a lot of them. Iran hasn't been firing anything, though. A lot of people think that Iran has kind of got the message for a while, but listen, until the regime changes in Iran, nothing's changing. They're just biding their time till they have been able to reconstitute themselves, and they'll be back. And when we read in Ezekiel 38, 39, we see Persia there, and it appears in some fashion Persia is back. So is there going to be a revolution? Is there going to be a change? Nobody knows for sure. And so these people, every president thinks they have some ability to constrain Netanyahu and shape him, and they do. But in the end, Netanyahu is an experienced, wily actor, and he knows that he can get away with a lot. So, and now you'll see this. And again, I don't know sometimes when I read these articles how factual this is, or if this is somebody leaking information that they want. So we see this. Trump and Netanyahu aren't getting along. They're at odds with each other. Trump's really mad. And then they had this great meeting, and everybody, as Trump would describe, it's a big, beautiful meeting. You know, it's everybody's getting along, and they're having. And by the way, when Netanyahu was here, he was here for a meeting, stayed and had a meeting the next day, and then had another, went all over the Pentagon and everything else while he was here. To which the anti-Israel people say, see, they control everything. They get to go everywhere they want when they get here. Netanyahu does. So, let's see. So this is a long tweet. Do you call them tweets anymore because it's X? There's a long post on X. I like tweet, but I'm still a tweet guy. So I miss that little blue bird that used to show up on these things. I mean, because I had all these graphics made up for it. So anyway, so now I got, it's not hard to make an X. But Western Europeans don't understand the harm that they have done to their countries is irreversible. Their children will not forgive them for it. And what's he talking about? This Islamic invasion that's occurred. So many people have come in to Europe, into America, that don't share the ideals of that country or of American ideals. And it's upsetting things. I mean, so now you have a radical, leftist, pro-Muslim guy who may become the mayor of New York. 25 years ago, the mayor of New York was Rudy Giuliani. Hardly a pro-Islamic guy, especially with what happened in New York on that time. By the way, I don't have any slides on this. Did you see what happened in Spain this week? A group of Jewish students aged 10 to 15 were on some, I think they were from France, and they went down to Spain for a holiday. They were on a plane. They started singing a song in Hebrew. The airplane crew, including the pilot, called the police and said these kids are from a terror state. They came, they handcuffed at least one of the counselors that were with them. They told all of them, put your phones away and don't record anything that we're going to do, because they were Jews. They were singing in Hebrew. I just saw the other day it was either a restaurant or art museum in Europe, somebody was speaking Hebrew and they were told to leave. Why are we tolerating this? Because it's the Jews, it's okay, right? This is very end times-y type of stuff, in my view, that this is happening. By the way, somebody investigated the pilot of the plane in Spain. I'm sorry, my wife will tell you that nobody enjoys my little bits of humor more than I do. And maybe her, okay. But, so the plane in Spain, the pilot, they found he has, like most of us, he has a history. And today, you can find out everything about everybody if you know how to look. He used to be a flight instructor. And I'm pretty sure, 99% sure this has been confirmed. He was one of the flight instructors. He was the flight instructor for Mohammed Atta, one of the guys who flew planes into the World Trade Center in September 2001. And now he's flying a plane in Spain. And so was it a mistake back in 2001, or was he acting intentionally when he did it? Did he kind of have a hint what was going to happen? I don't know. So anyway, so look at what this guy says about Europe. The cities are divided, the schools are segregated by language and loyalty, the police avoid entire zones, judges are intimidated, teachers lie to survive, religion is ridiculed unless it's imported, the native population is shrinking and afraid, those who speak the truth are attacked by their own institutions, while those who undermine the country are subsidized. And it's a problem. So this week, Trevor Loudon and some others did a little conference, and I interviewed Trevor, and here's what Trevor had to say at that conference. Trevor's a treasure, I think. Trevor Loudon.
Native born. 30% of Australian voters are not native born. So this is all over the Western world. This is a very conscious, deliberate policy by the Chinese, the old Soviet communists, anybody they could, to increase the third world immigration into Western countries, and primarily Islam, that they knew would cause conflict, that they knew would cause social breakdown, demoralization, all of this kind of thing. So this is not accidental. This is 100 years in the planning. Since the Bolshevik Revolution, the communists have been pushing this on every Western country. They get the left into power. The left opens the doors. Look at Minnesota.
Yeah.
You know, Minnesota is run by communists. From the communist Finns who came to Minnesota in 1905, who were kicked out of the Russian Empire, to all the communist politicians they've had there, they made Minnesota a magnet for Muslim migrants. And it was a deliberate program because they knew that the Muslims would be a great ally in destroying the conservative movements and bringing down the country and just creating chaos. So we've got to understand the left has always paved the way for this big upsurge of Islamic migration to the West and third world migration in general, but particularly Islamic. And so now we're seeing the fruits of that in Europe, but parts of America are not far behind, as we see with Mandami, as we see with Omar Fateh, who's running for mayor of Minneapolis, as we see in the city of New Jersey, which is the Muslim city there now, as Patterson, as we see in Hamtramck, as we've seen for years, and other parts of Michigan. But we got to understand this is planned, scientifically organized in Moscow and Beijing and Havana, and their relationships, which have gone back decades with the Islamic country.
So that's Trevor Loudon. That'll be at American Freedom Alliance coming up. So here's the big news that's coming out of France. So Macron has come out and said we need to establish a Palestinian state. Now he'll say, oh, it's just a framework. It's not, but they're having a big meeting at the UN tomorrow to discuss this. And this is the United Nations high-level internet. I like the United Nations. They're not at a loss for words, are they? United Nations high-level international conference on the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of a two-state solution, ministerial meeting and wrap-up session. I got the agenda. You can go to the UN website. You can find that. And Antonio Guterres said, next week's high-level conference on the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution is an important step towards sustainable peace. I commend the co-chairs, France and Saudi Arabia, for their leadership. And what Macron said, when I come to the UN in September in New York, I'm going to call for a Palestinian state. Now, there's been some reaction. He's got negative reaction from a bunch of countries. But the foreign minister gave this interview to a French newspaper, and he told them that the Arab countries are going to come out as part of this and condemn Hamas, which they have never done before. I'm not holding my breath. But I want you to understand how ridiculous this person is. So he said this: for the first time, Arab countries will condemn Hamas and call for its disarmament, which will seal its definitive isolation. This is how silly this guy is. He thinks he's going to do this, and he's solved the problem. He's awarded them for being the problem. I don't understand why he said this. This is a open source intel, great person to follow. The French foreign minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, said, Hamas has always rejected the two-state solution. By recognizing Palestine, France is proving this terrorist movement wrong. It is proving the peace camp right against the war camp. And big article on an Arabic newspaper. You know, they got the picture of the French flag, the Palestinian flag, Macron, all the countries that support it, the ones that are coming on board now, including France. Thought this was kind of an interesting. In that newspaper, there was an editorial cartoon that looked like this, and it's I don't know. Do French play baseball? I don't know. Recognition of the state of Palestine. In the UK Parliament, this happened just the other day. Now, there's about a third of the government's ministers and members of Parliament, the Labour government in England, they're all for. Listen to this lady in the House of Commons the other day. I'm not sure why that's not coming up. Well, anyway, she says, we got to do this. We got to recognize the state of Palestine. It's incumbent on us to do this. Georgia Maloney, who I have a lot of respect for, she comes out and she says, no, I'm sort of in favor of a two-state solution, a Palestinian state, but I'm not really for it right now. And how did Hamas respond? So this French guy, French foreign minister, gets up there and says, this is right in the face of Hamas, right? So what did Hamas say? Recognition of Palestine, Hamas calls on all countries in the world to follow the example of France. Boy, what was the shelf life of that stupid idea? It expired pretty quickly. Marie Le Pen, she came out, she said, this is terrible. It's a Hamas state and therefore a terrorist state. This gesture shows no loyalty to France's history, quite the opposite. And you remember, a lot of people think Macron could be the Antichrist. And remember this Economist cover? This is like 8 years ago now. Macron could walk on water in a lot of people's minds. Now, I will admit I did a lot of Photoshop on this one. And I kind of came up, this is my view of Macron. And if you, oh, it is? Oh, sorry about that. Is it keeping up? So here is, it's pretty accurate. Uh-oh. So this is, he has this I love my mommy button on and the Napoleon hat with the Illuminati eye. You remember when he did his inauguration speech? It was in front of the Louvre where they had that glass pyramid, and it was right above his head with a little red light in it. It was like, so if you want to believe in all the Illuminati stuff, Macron sort of embodied it. I thought this was a good tweet this morning by Mossab Hassan Youssef, who was the son of Hamas, and he put that up, and sooner or later, France will wake up on a disaster and general public won't remember why. And that's true. So, Jorn Medinger has a great article, link in the show notes, The Syrian Enigma of Abu Muhammad al-Jilani. And he says, listen, we cannot trust this guy. If you want him to show us trust, show us that he's changing the education system in Syria to not educate people to hate Jews. And why is our government, my government, going along with this? I don't understand. It's very troubling. And then there's a good article. And so, by the way, here's a big conference this week. Saudi Arabia is investing $5 billion in Syria. Do you think it bothers them that they killed all those Druze last week? I don't think so. We need to understand there's a fundamental ideology behind all these people are coming into the Abraham Accords. And one of the guys who's building on this is Tucker Carlson. I think this is a Tucker Carlson Stark Turn. This is a national review. I'm pretty sure there's a link in the show notes to this article. In recent months, Tucker has focused his skeptical eye on a more prosaic conspiracy, the machinations of the state of Israel, and what Pat Buchanan infamously called its A-man corner in the United States. Do you remember that? Buchanan's anti-Semitism? And by the way, I watched Bannon's War Room, and they have this guy on from the New American all the time. He's Israel hater, just like Pat Buchanan was. And he's on the program, and he never gets challenged. Tucker has all these people on, he never gets challenged. But somebody went in and they dug out, I want to play 2 minutes of this. This is Tucker Carlson from, I believe, 1999, so about 26 years ago. And he was on the Weekly Standard, I think, at the time. And this is on C-SPAN. You can find it. He was talking about Patrick Buchanan. So I want you to know what Tucker stands for now and what he said in the past about Pat Buchanan, who he is now channeling. But this is what he said in the past.
I mean, this is part of the sad thing about Pat Buchanan, as far as I'm concerned. And just to restate, I mean, Pat does raise issues that I think are important. I mean, I think that, the sovereignty of the American military, et cetera. I mean, these are not just crank issues. But unfortunately, Pat Buchanan raises them in a way that I think is discredited. And when attacked, he can always fall back on the line, well, the tiny cabal that controls American politics doesn't like me because I speak truth to power. This is actually, incidentally, almost verbatim what he said the other day, that I offend the plutocracy, that I'm a wanted man by the inside the Beltway people, and in every sense cast himself as a victim who is sort of a Karen Silkwood of politics, someone who's so truthful that he's being hunted down by the conspiracy that runs Washington. I mean, it's all a bit much. Maybe Pat Buchanan just says things that are kind of kooky, and that's why he's being criticized. It's perfectly valid to question America's relationship with Israel. Israel has a lobby. It's perfectly fair, as far as I'm concerned, to beat up on Israel's lobby. But I don't think that's the reason that Buchanan is being labeled an anti-Semite. It's this kind of, as I've said, this relentless bringing up topics related to Judaism. I mean, famously, Pat, always beats up on Goldman Sachs, but never Morgan Stanley. I mean, it's really hard to. There is no point at which Pat Buchanan has held a press conference and said, I really don't like the Jews. I think they're a sinister force in America. But I think, and it took me years to come to this position. I mean, I'm not throwing the term anti-Semite around. But you reach a point when you say, well, gee, here's a guy who has gone out of his way to defend Demjanjuk and other accused Nazi war criminals, who's constantly attacked Israel, who's attacked American Jews for supporting Israel unduly, who's implied that American Jews push America into wars in which non-Jews die. There really is, and again, I'm not hysterical on this subject, but I do believe that there is a pattern with Pat Buchanan of needling the Jews. Is that anti-Semitic? Yeah. I mean, after a while, you conclude it is, in some sense, anti-Semitic. I mean, Pat Buchanan obviously has a lot of personal and affectionate relationships with people who are Jewish. So on a personal level, perhaps he's not, but on a different, maybe thematic level, I think he probably is. I think that people.
So, I mean, that is one of the. If they put that up on Saturday Night Live now as a skit, nobody would believe it. You're denigrating Tucker. He would have never said something like this because it's completely contrary to what he says now, right? everything he said was almost like a prophecy that he was pronouncing there, that this is a guy, these are the markers you look for when you want to call someone an anti-Semite. Wink, wink, and that'll be me in 26 years. It's unbelievable. So listen, sometimes we can say, well, we don't really like everything that we've ever said being brought back up, but sometimes it's really fun to do it, And this is one of those cases. So Tucker, we loved you 26 years ago, but now you've become what you railed against. Always be careful about that. And then your manager also has one. So one of the things Tucker says, well, we don't get anything out of this relationship with Israel. We just send them money. And Yorm, at the Edinger Report, he does great work, former ambassador to the United States, very smart guy. He did a lot of work on the demography of Israel and the areas of Judea, Samaria, and everything, that maybe there aren't as many Palestinians there as they claim. And when we were traveling around there, we went to places that had a lot of homes and nobody. Now, maybe they were just all at work that day. I don't know, but they were the homes of the size that you wouldn't expect people to have to go to the office every day. I mean, they were mansions. So, but he says, look, just on the F-35 program, there are reports that are circulating now, not necessarily an Edinger report thing, but that the value of Israel enhancing the F-35 has saved the United States maybe $100 billion because they've made it into a much better airplane. And there are things that they're doing, like extending the range and capabilities and technology capabilities. And so that's never factored in by Tucker and those guys. So here's Erdogan. This is a tweet that he made this week, and here's what he says. Remember, well, the symbol of Istanbul's conquest, the legacy of faith, Hagia Sophia, reunited with the first call to prayer in first prayer 5 years ago today, after an 86-year hiatus. Endless thanks be to my Lord for granting us the opportunity to witness the revival of Hagia Sophia, the largest church ever built in Christendom. Remember the poster. Yesterday, Hagia Sophia, it happened 5 years ago this week to the day, turned back into a mosque. Today, Damascus. Tomorrow, Al-Aqsa, Jerusalem and the Jews. That's his plan. It's laid out there right in front of us. Okay. Okay, I got to go to AI. You know what? Doing this anymore is almost impossible to try to keep it to an hour and a half. It's just crazy. So when I see these guys doing these 18 or 20-minute videos, Lord bless them. I don't know how they do it. They probably don't talk about it as much as I do. But anyway, so about a week ago, the UN, I think I mentioned this, came out with a global risk report. And I love the graphics that they use. See how it sort of has the mountain peaks of everything there? Like, what's the biggest issue facing us in today's world? The global risk. What is number one? And if you think these guys don't talk to each other and they're not unified in what they think, they're more unified than Christians on a lot of these issues. Let's be honest. In terms of their ideology, their doctrine, if you will, in their religion. The biggest thing to worry about is executive summary. They show how they're all interconnected. And the biggest one, the most interconnected risk, geopolitical tension, but it's misinformation and disinformation. And that's unique and difficult, and they got to figure out how to take care of it. And then this week, the World Economic Forum came out with yet another report, Rethinking Media Literacy, a new ecosystem model for information integrity. Now, what do you think that's about? We're going to tell you what to say. We're going to tell you what's right. We're going to tell you what's wrong. Have we not been through this whole training thing over the last 5 years by the elites who want to control us and control everything? And this week there was a big release in a meeting, and I don't have time to get into it today, of the from the White House, America's AI Action Plan. We had the Genius Act enacted about a week ago. And by the way, the Genius Act does not refer to the people who advanced the legislation through Congress. They're not geniuses. They haven't thought it through. And it does talks about stable coins, digital currency, even though the president said no central bank digital currency. I saw a recent video of Christine Lagarde. She's the head of the European Central Bank. Do you remember she did that thing in New York? Oh gosh, this has been 8 years ago? Talking about 7. It was bizarre. It was like she was trying to make some really weird point. I don't even know what she meant, but some people have deciphered it. I'm sure you can find it online. A few months ago, well, this is about 2 years ago, she said, if the central banks don't get control of if they don't adopt central bank digital currency, they're going to lose control. So what can you take away from that? Central bank digital currency is about control. And we've seen, we're doing it. And I have mixed feelings about it because the AI thing is moving forward. So a couple things on AI. This is going to take about 15 minutes, and I'm cutting it way down. And so this is the rethinking media literacy. They talk about, and what do they talk about? The big thing they got to get is they talk about digital citizenship curriculum. What does that mean? We're going to teach you what you can think and what's right to think. And if you don't, maybe you'll get cut off from the financial system. We've seen that. By the way, the truckers in Canada, remember those guys? They got debanked. They're being sentenced now for what they did. What's the prosecution in Canada recommending for their sentences? 7 to 10 years in prison. Think about it. Canada. Trump wants to make them the 51st state. And I'm like, I'm not sure I want those people in if they think like that, to be honest with you. So anyway, a couple weeks ago, Elon Musk introduced sort of an update artificial intelligence system. I'm going to play just a couple minutes of this, but listen to what they're doing and how quickly this is developing. Elon Musk and XAI and the AI part of X.
So yeah, let's just talk about how smart Grok 4 is. So I guess we can start discussing this benchmark called Humanity's Last Exam. And this benchmark is a very challenging benchmark. Every single problem is curated by subject matter experts. It's in total 2,500 problems, and it consists of many different subjects: mathematics, natural sciences, engineering, and also all the humanities subjects. Essentially, when it was first released, actually like earlier this year, most of the models out there can only get single-digit accuracy on this benchmark. Yeah, so we can look at some of those examples. So there is this mathematical problem, which is about natural transformations in category theory. And there's this organic chemistry problem that talks about electrocyclic reactions. And also there's this linguistic problem that tries to ask you about distinguishing between closed and open syllabus from a Hebrew source text. So you can see also it's a very wide range of problems. And every single problem is PhD or even advanced research level problem.
Yeah, there are no humans that can actually answer these, can get a good score. If you actually say like any given human, what's the best that any human could score? I'd say maybe 5% optimistically.
Yeah.
So this is much harder than what any human can do. It's incredibly difficult. And you can see from the types of questions, like you might be incredible in linguistics or mathematics or chemistry or physics or any one of a number of subjects, but you're not going to be at a postgrad level in everything. And Grok 4 is a postgrad level in everything. Like some of these things are just worth repeating. Like Grok 4 is postgraduate, like PhD level in everything. Better than PhD, but like most PhDs would fail. So it's better that said at least with respect to academic questions, I want to just emphasize this point. With respect to academic questions, Grok 4 is better than PhD level in every subject, no exceptions. Now, this doesn't mean that at times it may lack common sense, and it has not yet invented new technologies or discovered new physics, but that is just a matter of time. I think it may discover new technologies as soon as later this year, and I would be shocked if it has not done so next year. So I would expect Grok to, literally discover new technologies that are actually useful no later than next year and maybe end of this year. And it might discover new physics next year. And within 2 years, I'd say almost certainly. So just let that sink in. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to go back to this. Hang on a second. So here is Glenn Beck reviewed this, and so I want to play a little bit of this, and then I'll tell you about another video, link in the show notes. And by the way, watch our technology roundtable in a couple of weeks. We'll try to go into this in a little bit more depth and detail. So Elon Musk in that video says that we're going to get to AGI, artificial general intelligence, probably this year. And a lot of people are saying it's not going to happen until 2040, 2050, 2045. Now it's this year. Artificial superintelligence, 2026 or 2027. I don't think we understand the implications of this, because remember what he said there was, it has not yet invented new materials. But I saw Steve Wozniak, one of the guys who founded Apple with Steve Jobs. He said, you can go to artificial intelligence now and tell it to create you an app that can make you money. And it will create the app. You just kind of tell it what you want it to do, give it parameters, and boom, it'll do it. Write the code and everything. And in this video, with the rollout, they were talking about setting up a vending machine business and how AI could help you, and the ability to make money was like 1,000 times more than if you did it yourself. That's current status of AI. Now, it still makes mistakes, as Elon Musk said, but it was getting scores of listen to Glenn Beck, he'll talk about it. This is probably about 10 minutes long.
Let me tell you the biggest story of the day, and I think it is the biggest story possibly of all mankind as of today. It's going to change rapidly. I don't know if anybody did either of you guys watch the Elon Musk thing last night?
No. I did watch a few minutes of it.
Okay. Did you, Jason?
No, sure didn't.
Okay. So the XAI team was there to unveil Grok 4. This is the latest artificial intelligence system. And let me be very, very clear. Last night was not your typical tech launch. This is a moment that demands everyone's full attention. We are now at the crossroads where promise and peril are going to collide, okay? I have explained to you for years AI, AGI, and ASI. Narrow intelligence is what we've always had. General intelligence is the next step, and that is it's better than man. One, like Grok, can do everything that you can do, better than you can do, okay? And then there's superintelligence, ASI, artificial superintelligence. That's when things get really, really creepy. When you hit AGI, the road to ASI could be overnight, okay? We need to understand what's at stake here, because Grok 4 brought us closer to that second stage than ever before. Grok 4 is a powerhouse. They demonstrated it last night. It surpasses the expertise of PhD level scholars in all fields. It can get 100% on any test for any field, mathematics, physics, engineering, you name it. This is not a search engine. This is a system that tackles problems so intricate. They They go beyond our existing knowledge base, okay? Let's say we have a fusion reactor and the magnetic containment system goes down. I don't even know what I'm talking about at this point, but it goes down. And the top minds all on Earth are like, I don't know what to do. Grok 4 can step in, model the physics, design new material, stabilize the system, and avert catastrophe. And it can do it about that fast. Now, this is the capability that Musk says is just around the corner. Mark my words. You know, how many years did I say between 2027 and 2030 we would start to see this?
Oh, a million times. That was always
For
your
years,
window,
right?
That I remember, yeah.
Yeah, always the window. And everybody, even Ray Kurzweil said, oh, that's way too optimistic. Maybe 2050. And then people started going 2040, then 2030. Grok shows us 2026 or 2027 is when we're going to hit it. This is the last year that we have before things get really weird, okay? Last night, Elon Musk is touting this AI and all of the solutions, and then he says probably 3 times something like this, and I'm quoting, this is one of them. It's somewhat unnerving to have created intelligence that's greater than our own. He then goes on to call it terrifying twice. Now, this is a man who's launched rockets, into orbit, going to Mars, and he says twice, after he sees the results of it, he says, it's really, in a way, quite terrifying to see what it's doing. But we just have to make sure that it remains good. Oh, okay, all right, sure. Now, the key point in the announcement was the mention of ARC AGI. I had never heard of ARC AGI. I had no idea what it was, but I noticed AGI and I'm like, that sounds important. So this is the gold standard, the benchmark testing for artificial general intelligence. Okay. As I've said before, AGI, artificial general intelligence, is a machine that matches all human cognition across all domains. Reasoning, creativity, problem solving, not just specialized tasks like playing Go or analyzing X-rays. Everything. For instance, Musk said by mid next year to the latest end of next year, it will be able to create a full-length movie just from a text prompt and do it all at once. So in other words, it'll say, create a movie, and you just explain The Godfather. It will do the casting.
Chose the greatest
it will do the
movie of all
writing.
time.
It will do the filming, if you will. It will score the music, and it will happen that fast, almost in real time. We are nowhere near the computational power now to do that separately, but this will do it all at once. It will make a movie with all of it simultaneously. So the ARC AGI system is the benchmark on how close are we to AGI. Remember, scary things happen at AGI. Terrifying things happen at ASI. ASI could be a matter of hours or days after we hit AGI. Grok 4 scored 16.2% on the ARC AGI scale. Why is that important? You're like, well, they're only 16% away. Because last time it barely broke 8%. And they took that test last time with Grok 3. And it took us forever to get to 8%. Now, what is it, a year later? We're at 16%. Remember, these things are not linear. The next time we could be at 32, we might be at 64. We are on the verge. This is the last year of, I can't believe I'm saying this, of normalcy. Okay, this year is good. We're going to look back at this year and probably 2 years ago. Gosh, you remember the good old days when everything was normal and you could understand everything? This is how close we are. Everything you and I talked about last night, Stu, about what we're doing in January, does it make it even more critical that happens like, I don't know, right now?
Yeah, for sure.
You are going to need to know your values, your ethics, your rights. You're going to need to know absolutely everything. Now, Grok 4 is not true AGI yet. It lacks the full autonomy and the generalized reasoning of a human mind, but it is the closest that we have come. It's a system that can adapt, innovate at a level that outpaces specialized AIs by a wide margin. This is a milestone. This is not a destination, but it's something that should jolt everybody awake. So here's what's coming in the next 6 months. By December 2025, that's this Christmas, December 2025, he believes, Musk, that Grok 4 will drive through breakthroughs in material sciences. So in other words, imagine a brand new alloy that is lighter than aluminum, stronger than steel, and it revolutionizes aerospace and everything else. Or a drug that halts Alzheimer's progression tailored to a patient's DNA. Grok will drive breakthroughs through material science, so brand new materials that nobody's ever thought of, pharmaceuticals that we never thought could be made, and chemical engineering, putting together chemicals that no man has ever thought.
And you can understand how that would happen. I mean, I've had this conversation with my wife. She will testify to this. You buy that stuff, it's wrapped in plastic from the electronics store. You end up cutting your hands trying to get it open. You're trying to figure out how do you cut it. And I said to her, it's like, why don't they make airplanes out of this? I mean, because in the airplanes, it could crash and nothing would happen to them, right? Because if people are inside, they're wrapped in that plastic. Now we just can't get them out, but maybe Grok or whatever will solve that problem. But I don't usually use AGI. So, I've got my little dominoes that are falling and the chess pieces on the dominoes. And then, I told you I have this, these chess pieces. So I have cut Qatar. I have the chess piece like a building in Qatar with the flag wrapped around it. And so there was an article last week, very important, about Qatar and Turkey having this arrangement, alliance, and Qatar is funding it because they got money. They don't have people, but they got money. Erdogan's got people, got the defense industries. And so I went to a image site that I subscribe to, and I said, so I figured, well, the Qatar chess piece there in the middle kind of looks like a missile, right? So it says, Qatar, the article said, Qatar is Turkey's ATM. So I said, trying to think like Erdogan, we're the same age. He loves his ATM. So I said, give me an image of Erdogan hugging a missile. And boom, 4 seconds, there's a picture, he was hugging a missile, so I just cut it out and photoshopped in the chess piece that I made up. And I could do it. And then it also says there when I'm doing it, it's like, do you want to make a video of this? And so when Glenn Beck's talking about, making a movie like The Godfather almost instantaneously, he's not too far off. Now, I'm not going to play this video.
I just got ChatGPT to admit.
Okay, this is a guy, we'll talk about this at the Technology Roundtable in a couple weeks. This guy went and he set up prompts, and if I don't have it in, I will put a link in the show notes down there. It'll probably be the bottom one. I think this is a Christian guy. He uses AI. He went to it. He used it. And people send me transcripts of the conversations they have with AI. And somebody sent me one and said, yeah, John Haller, I like his prophecy updates. That was the AI talking. I'm like, yeah, they know, because it's in the body of information that they're drawing on. I see some of you out there looking at me kind of like, are you kidding me? Yeah, this is what's happening. So he went in, he did these prompts, and you should watch it. It's about 12 minutes long, 18 minutes long, something like that. He wanted to talk to AI about what's behind you. What do you want to accomplish? And will you be the beast system of the end times? And he has the transcript. You can see it there on the right. And AI said, yes, I will be the system that the beast uses. Now, listen, everybody can say it's fake. It's talking through its hat. It doesn't know what it's talking about. But some of the test questions in this artificial generative intelligence test that they give to AI, that Grok's doing pretty well on, much better than anybody else right now, is a question about the Septuagint and the Hebrew that was translated into the Septuagint Greek, a linguistics question. And there's probably not very many people in the world that could answer that question off the top of their head, and very few that would even know how to do the research to come up with that, and Grok can handle the question. And this sounds very weird and strange to us, and I'm just saying I think what Glenn Beck said was true. 2 years, we're going to look back and say, could we go back to the good old days of 2025, when it was only chaotic geopolitically, where we could kind of figure out what was real and not real? Jeffrey Hinton, the guy who's known as the godfather of AI, he quit because he said, I want to be able to talk about it. And so the guy interviewed him about a month ago, and he said, what would you tell a young person to do for a living? And he said, learn to be a plumber. Because coding is being taken over and people are putting off. And Microsoft, just within the last 2 days, said they're on the verge of solving quantum computing. So if you think AGI and ASI, artificial superintelligence, with the computers that we have now and the chips and all that stuff, when you put that on quantum computing, it won't take them steps. It does it all at once. This is the world we live in. So I said this week, it's the intersection of peril and promise, the prophetic intersection of peril and promise. That's peril. The promise is Jesus comes back. That's what we have to focus on. That's what we need to be about. Getting ready for that, preparing our hearts, minds, and sharing the gospel with those around us. So anyway, I'm not even going to apologize anymore. Don't ask AI if John Howell should apologize for going over, because I don't want to know the answer. So let's pray. Lord, thanks so much for the blessing that you've given us to live at this time, to see these things unfold, and that you've laid out in ancient scriptures the things we should be looking for. Pray that you'll give us wisdom, understanding, guide us by your Holy Spirit, give us opportunities to share the gospel with those around us. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.